Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to address you here this afternoon. My name is Arti Holamaini, and I'm Director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. We have a great discussion lined up, not a very long one, and I would like to start by giving the floor to Guy Ryder, the Under-Secretary General for Policy from the Executive Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Guy, please, you have the floor.
Thanks, Arti. I'm sitting here somewhat isolated, but I'm very pleased to be with everybody in the room today and to try to kick off what I think is going to be a really important discussion on outer space and the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me remind everybody that 8 years ago, the leaders of the world came together at the UN in New York and agreed a transformative plan of action for people, planet and prosperity. We know it as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It contains 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, covering all of the dimensions of development: climate change, poverty, health, hunger, education, jobs, inequality. And these are the targets that we have set ourselves to achieve in the period up to 2030. I think it's fair to say that when those leaders came together in 2015, few of them, if any, could have grasped the increasingly critical role that space would play in the achievement or the non-achievement of these goals. The reality is that today, space technology applications and resources have become absolutely indispensable to practically all of these Sustainable Development Goals. Some examples: telecommunications. Satellite technologies are the key to bridging the digital divide, unlocking affordable internet access in the most remote locations of the world. Feeding a growing population, precision agriculture enabled by satellite technologies already informs management practices of farmers and improves efficiencies, and so much more can be done to achieve greater outputs while reducing inputs. And saving lives and preventing destruction of critical infrastructure. Understanding our planet, anticipating extreme weather events and preparing for their impact is paramount. And as the climate crisis turbocharges disasters, space solutions often make the difference between life and death. Now, colleagues, halfway through the battle for the 2030 agenda, we are way off target. The latest stocktake showed that only 15% of the targets in the agenda are on track to be achieved. So we have to have a course correction, we have to accelerate, we have to rescue the SDGs, and outer space has to help us to do just that. The question is how? And I think for an agenda whose underlying objective is to leave nobody behind, we have to think particularly about how those countries in the global south which do not have access to space technologies and data can be included in the process. I think that we've got two important areas of action where there is something positive to be said, and they may give us some direction for this conversation. The first is about space diversity. Colleagues, over the last 2 decades, we have seen a steady increase in the number of spacefaring countries. 90 countries have at least one satellite in space today. In 2010, that figure was 50. That represents important progress. And many of these countries are in the global south. They haven't only launched satellites, but thanks to their steady development of space law and policy, they are also kick-starting space economies. For new private sector companies more and more present in space, both in the developed and developing countries, we need to ensure that they have platforms to coordinate and communicate, keeping space safe and sustainable. The other aspect of space diversity where we're not doing so great and need to do much better is in respect of gender. Looking at aerospace industry in its entirety, the figure shows that only about 20 to 25% of the workforce are women. This has to be improved upon self-evidently. This is not only about investing in programs of education and STEM and aerospace for girls and women, but it's also about ensuring that space is used as an enabler to education, Research has shown that increasing gender diversity is a clear positive impactor on earnings and on GDP growth as well. So we have an interest in moving in this direction. Space diversity. What about space diplomacy? This is the second and concluding point I want to make. With the emergence of new actors in space, there has been also an acceleration in interest and action in space diplomacy. This includes new national and regional cooperation efforts and more space-specific events, and I can cite the UN Portugal Conference on Space Management and Sustainability in Lisbon next May. It's imperative that the voices of the Global South are heard in these fora, and the Office for Outer Space Affairs, Arti is here to tell us about it, is taking steps to ensure the integration of African countries and other continents in UN space-related activities and events. Colleagues, I want to draw particular attention in conclusion to a major UN event next year. The Summit of the Future will gather in New York in September of 2024. It is a once-in-a-generation gathering of world leaders designed to revive multilateralism, to get the SDGs back on track, and to address new and emerging issues. Space will be a key part of the conversation at that summit. The Secretary-General has already called and published proposals for new governance frameworks in areas such as space traffic management, management of space debris, resource extraction, and progress towards a new treaty on outer space security, preventing the weaponization of space and arms race in space in these already hazardous moments. This is, I think, an opportunity that we can seize, an opportunity that we must not miss. And I welcome the opportunity to bring it to your attention. And whilst I'll have to leave this event before it concludes, I look forward very much through Arti of getting the feedback from what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy, for sharing your opening remarks with us, and I hope that everybody present hears loud and clear that the UN Secretary-General understands and supports space and understands in particular the absolutely vital role that space technologies, space services and space data have to play in enabling achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So equitable access to outer space has been a long-standing subject of debate. We are living at a time when technology development has really allowed a democratization of access to space. As Guy said, USA has played an important role in that. We have helped countries go from being non-spacefaring nations to actually launching their first satellites, but also go beyond that, but establishing space laws, space policies, and kickstarting their space economies overall. But the real question here is, what will democratization of space mean for the future? Will the ambitions of new spacefaring nations be limited to developing experimental CubeSats and nanosats because the sweet spots like the LEO orbit, for example, is already congested? Is it too late to hope for sovereign access to these kind of sweet spots? Do developing nations really need their own satellites? Or is it enough that they can access space services? Because in fact, that is what will drive the fastest progress in terms of improving people's lives. So these are the kind of issues that I would like to jump into a conversation about with our esteemed speakers. And I'm delighted to welcome Matías Campos, CEO of Astrolink Space Technologies, a startup that's providing in-orbit services for emerging countries. Roshan Firak, Director of the Maldives Space Research Organization. Loreto Moraga, President of ASHIDE, the Chilean Space Association. Temi Osunrinde from Tezite, Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Mika Walter-Range, Chairman of the Kalis Foundation, and I think you're more famous for the Space Foundation Space Report, in fact. And Nayan Bakyadio, Satellite Research Fellow from Nepal. Thank you all for joining me. I'd like to jump in immediately with this question of to what extent should the Global South really be striving to have their own satellite? And to what extent should they, in fact, be focusing on space services, which can, for example, as Guy said, bring unconnected communities online within a space of months? So Matthias, can I invite you to say a couple of opening remarks? Maybe take 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes. We only have 35 overall. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you, Arti, and bonjour à tous. It's a great pleasure to be here in the Paris Peace Forum again, because I usually tend to say that these events are great because the space people usually talk only among space people, and this is kind of the events where we break that space bubble. And so I thank you all for being here and answering your question, Arti. I think it's very important for Global South countries to have their first satellite, but not only their first satellite, but their own space infrastructure, their own space capabilities. So, for example, it's not only about showing that we can put something in space, but actually bring back that data, bring back that information back to ground to benefit our communities on Earth. So also in the Global South, it's not only about what we can do to be helped, it's what we can do to help ourselves and to help each other. That's why my company has been founded in Ecuador to solve this question that has been in my mind ever since I was a child, where people would tell me, space is not for you, space is not for us. Why would we even do that? I went on to study to become a space engineer and bring back the first and only space company in the country, and now leading in the International Astronautical Federation, the Administrative Committee for Emerging Ecosystems. It's where we are really pushing forward for this network of connecting all us together. I'm happy to say that we're partnered actually last couple of months in Baku in the International Astronautical Congress with the Maldives to continue with our projects in the Global South. And yeah, I hope that's what we have on discussion today on the table to see how we can continue helping each other and make the most of being space-capable countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Roshan, can I come to you? I know that the Maldives Space Research Organization was only founded last year with the ambition of becoming spacefaring and focusing on climate change, which is a very specific need for your country. Please share your thoughts with us. How important is this for you?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and once again, we believe that these international forums are definitely the key to partnerships and discussions moving forward. Regarding the question of things like our own sovereign satellite, it's one of those things that we're assessing, and we definitely see a lot of potential benefits. We understand that one of the issues that we have is a lack of updated information for informed decision-making. An equatorial Maldivian satellite, for example, would offer great revisit times. It offers utility not just to us, but to other island nations, as well as nations alongside the equator, which is an underserved orbit, actually. Data sovereignty, as well as becoming an active participant in the space sector rather than just only benefiting from it, is something that we're aiming for. We believe that we can achieve continuous coverage for the Maldives with far fewer satellites, for example, than countries in higher latitudes. As one of the more vulnerable countries to climate change, we firmly believe that in order to achieve the global goals, updated real-time data is an issue that we have. We also need this data to be affordable and relevant to us. So these are some of the key things that we're highlighting in considering the potential for something like that, but it is something that we see positively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roshan. It's true, we mustn't deny the value that launching your own satellite and becoming an active player in the space sector actually has on STEM education, kickstarting a space economy nationally, and also on society as a whole. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let me turn to Loretta. Loretta, you are president of the Chilean Space Association. I'm very proud that USA, just 2 weeks ago, we ran a technical advisory mission in Chile to help you develop your space law. And earlier this year, Chile launched its first satellite, FA-SAT Delta. Please share your thoughts on this question. Sorry?
It's the fourth satellite.
It's your fourth satellite.
Yeah,
congratulations.
And also we have 3 from the University of Chile.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 2 active satellites and 3 from the university. So we are very proud of that. However, we don't have yet the institution. We don't have any space agency. So we have activity, we have infrastructure, we have people, but we need to have the correct point of contact in order not to lose opportunities. You can proceed with the question, or maybe I can check basically the idea. We talk about the space sovereignty, not in the terms of property or in political way. We basically refer that in Chile in relation to building our own capacities. The same point that you mentioned. Not only is a matter of having satellites, it's a matter of having the people to do all the chain, cover all the chain related to that, operate the satellite, build the satellite, but also download the information, process the information, and then people transmitting the information to policymakers and for the governmental people who have to take the decisions. Chile is a country, we have a catastrophe every month related to earthquakes, tsunamis, volcano eruption. So we really use and need to use the space information for monitoring and in a day-to-day living basis, because we are very connected. I think Chile is the country more connected with, we have more mobile phones than people in the country, and we have a we are very proud to have a very developed digital infrastructure. Yeah, however, we need to make the people conscious about the importance of the space, because in this moment, the public sector is not that convinced yet. So we don't have a long-term budget. We don't have the long-term people dedicated to space in the government doing a policy. So we have a lack there of will coming from the state. And we need to end with that. And our association is now basically focusing in doing that, in trying to push and get long-term space politics in order to build this ecosystem and really have this capacity building in the city and in the region. We know that we cannot do this alone. We have to work together in Latin America and the Caribbean to be really an actor now in this worldwide ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you, Loretta, for sharing your thoughts. Temi, can I come to you? You are VP of Sales and Marketing for Tizeti, a company that provides satellite broadband services in different parts of Africa. So you're very much on the service side rather than on the infrastructure side. What do you think around this question of whether each country needs its own satellite or whether it should benefit more from services?
All right, so I'll start with a thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Happy to be here to meet fellow collaborators in world development. My name is Temi. I work at Tizeti. Tizeti is a YC-backed ISP transforming internet services in Africa. We leverage solar-powered base stations to provide internet connectivity. So we're able to cut the costs usually associated with telcos, who spend a lot of rent, who spend a lot on diesel, who build big base stations. We build smaller base stations, and then we put solar on top of it to power it. For context, Africa still has, well, generally, Global South still have one of the highest numbers of unconnected people, but this is particularly prevalent in Africa, where, and if you look at the figures, between 60 to 78% are out of internet coverage. And if you look at this in terms of actual numbers, that is 78% of 1.4 billion people. Most of these people are rural areas, even some of them are in urban populations and so on. And then because they have operators who build infrastructure, maybe fiber or metro, they focus in urban areas that are commercially viable, but then they leave out other places that do not, and that is why Africa still has a high percentage of that. And so the focus is to improve inclusion by building infrastructure and whatever works. It was Xiaoping that said, whether a cat is black or white, as long as it kills mice, it's a good cat. Whatever works, whether it's backhaul from satellites or fiber, everything that works, let's get more people online. And then specifically to the question now on satellites. I think a lot of countries can afford it. Satellite is not cheap. It's not something you can buy off the racks. It's something you have to create and make. So some countries will be able to afford it. For countries who can, please, I think I implore them to go ahead. I expect that all countries should have at least one because it's necessary for them to also protect their digital integrity. We've seen a bit of what happened over the recent wars, Russia, Ukraine, and we've seen how some people were thrown offline because they didn't have their own infrastructure. So I think it's important generally for people to have, for countries to have their own satellites, if they can afford it.
Thank you. I must say I'm a little surprised by your answer, but very, very, very glad to hear it. Thank you very much. Let me go to Nayan. Nayan, you're from Nepal. Now, Nepal has experienced a disaster with an earthquake a few years ago, so you've very much been a beneficiary of satellite services that came from elsewhere, from foreign countries, were flown in to help save lives. At the same time, Nepal is also one of the winners of the an USA competition to launch a payload into space.
Yes.
What's your view on this question?
First of all, I would like to take opportunity to thank you guys for having me here. It has been a great opportunity, and I have connected with people that have the solutions of the challenges that we are facing back hometown. So going back to the question, I think every country should have a satellite, not for the satellite, but the things that go around there. Like in context of Nepal, there are many catastrophes like Gulf, earthquake, flood, so on. So we do need a capacity of satellite data analysis and all that to mitigate those problems. And it's not like we can pull that off without the skills that are required to build a satellite. So it's not about the satellite only, but the skills and the capacity and the infrastructure we built around it. Like in 2019, we launched our first satellite. And after that, we were more aware about the potential of satellite and satellite data analysis. Afterward, we have been involved in different projects for developing satellites and also utilizing satellite data to solve our problem. Like the project that I'm presenting over here is Space-Enabled Urban Solutions in Nepal. So we are solving the problems of the capital of Nepal. And also we are planning on making evacuation plans and early warning systems for the Gulf and flood and all that stuff. So there should be a satellite for every country.
Great, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Micah, if I can come to you. In your career, you have taken quite a broad view on the impact on space economies, how they evolve, what's important. I think it's very interesting to dig into this. Please share your thoughts on what do you think is important from a space economy perspective? Is it really accessing the data and the services? Is it the ability to launch a satellite? What is it?
I may have to give you the economist's answer of it depends. First, I'd like to thank the other people seated around this table for all that you have taught me in the past day and a half. Just hearing your stories, and Loreto, I would very much like to follow up with you after this, but it is very clear to me two different things. One is these are all incredibly worthwhile projects. The other thing that is clear is it is harder for them to access the funding that they need than it should be. Whether it's a commercial business seeking investment to expand, whether it's a non-governmental organization, whether it's the effort to put together a space agency or a coordinating body within a country, it is more challenging than it should be. And my feeling and the approach that the Kalis Foundation is taking to try to address this challenge is that the work needs to be done first, the economic work. If an economic case for the involvement of these countries in space has been made, then it's much easier to convince the national governments, to convince commercial investors, to convince philanthropic funders that these individual projects or their peers, they fit into this economic framework. There is a clear path to see how they're going to benefit their home countries. And with that clear path in front of us, then that becomes a much easier answer to say, yes, yes, they should be funded. Yes, they should receive the support. Yes, they should have the legal and regulatory resources needed to do what they do.
Thank you. That was rather short. I expected a bit more, but I shall come back to you. You're all saying very interesting things, and there's different angles that we can get into here. But the first one, for me, is there is a lot of satellite data which is being generated around the world. Really, a hell of a lot of data. Many of you have said you want your own data, you want your own satellites, you can generate your own data to look at what's happening in your region. Why not harness the power of the data that's already out there? Because at the end of the day, the next disaster is waiting to happen, right? We know that they're coming more frequently, more often. It takes time. It takes a lot of time to build and create your own space industry, space economy. But the data is already there. So what are your thoughts on that? Roshan, can I start with you?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think that in our perspective, those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. As the Maldives Space Research Organization, for example, one of the initiatives that we are taking in order for early disaster warning, we're actually working with detailed INSAR and LiDAR imagery to calculate land subsidence. So we want these islands to be able to see or be able to predict when and how bad the damage will be from sea swells, for example. And this is something that ties into the UN's early warning for all system. What I'm basically trying to say here is that while we might have these aspirations, tapping into easily accessible imagery is definitely something that we are doing in parallel. And I also would like to highlight some of the challenges for a geographical nation such as ours. For example, one image can really be something like 80% water due to the small size of our islands. We struggle to get these images because they're not affordable and they're not cost efficient. So we need data that's accessible, scalable, and consistently available, and that's really difficult sometimes with the PASO rate for the Maldives, for example. These questions are really essential for accurately informing things like climate adaptation, loss and damage. One of the challenges that we've also faced with accessing things like the GCF fund is that we haven't been able to historically prove that some damage to our coastline and infrastructure, for example, is a direct result of climate change. Data is the answer to all of this, and it is the answer to all of our climate mitigation and adaptation strategies moving forward. So I think that I want to make it really clear that while we do have aspirations and think this would be a great thing to do, there are challenges with the existing services and with the existing imagery that we really need to focus on finding solutions for.
Thank you, Roshan. I asked this question also because when we look at the satellite ecosystem as a whole, we know that the greatest value is actually generated from the downstream applications and services, not from the upstream infrastructure side. So bearing that in mind, can I invite you to also address the same question, Nayan?
Yeah, I do agree that we can use satellite images that are open source as well as that are provided by other companies. In our case, we do use open source data in case of disasters like earthquake. Like few weeks ago, we witnessed earthquake that took like 187 lives in Nepal. So we have been using data from Mexar and other companies to deal with those post-disaster assessment, to perform post-disaster assessments. But I think that having our own ecosystem and having our own infrastructure is one of the aspiring things that leads us to growth in this field. It's one of the reasons why we do what we are doing. And I do agree that we don't need to catch up with other countries as soon as we can, but we do have to have a vision to grow and to catch up with them in the long run.
Thank you very much. Matthias, can I bring you in?
For sure. Yes, so of course, to a lot of our customers who say, like, I want to launch a SAR satellite, I want to launch a hyperspectral camera, we say, we always have the debate. Should we encourage them to fly this payload, or should we point them towards the available services that are already on cloud? But then you have the distinction, right? Usually these companies that already exist think of our countries and say, oh, it's a country, let's charge them the premium country price. And this price is sometimes inaccessible. Of course, countries have money, but it's not that it's budgeted for this, it's budgeted for other things. So it really makes a difference if you have not a different infrastructure, but an infrastructure that understands the context by which your countries work. And that's why, as Rashan was saying, it's not mutually exclusive. We can work with the data that's already available, which unfortunately the one that is given or available to emerging countries is not of the best quality. Always there's a paywall towards the state-of-the-art technology that we cannot go through. Okay, so with those images, we prepare algorithms, we work together, and then when we launch the device, the tool, the instrument that we want to have in orbit for our purposes, that's when we really can make an impact for our countries. And it's not about doing it ourselves. It's I don't mind if it's a Ecuadorian satellite. I mind that it's a satellite or a constellation even, like you were saying, does a country need a satellite? Maybe we're past that. We don't have to be every country in the world has to have its own car brand, right? We'd rather just buy the Japanese cars that are great. But we would rather have a constellation of satellites that serves our purposes. So going back to our partnership with the Maldives, we're expanding our equatorial ground station network that's already active in Ecuador, having a second point in Maldives. And as they're thinking to launch instruments that have quick revisit times of low inclination places like the Maldives, this same constellation can be useful to us. And then it's not about having to always pay these high prices, but actually exchange of services. They have a mutually understand in the constellation, have a mutual understanding in the ground part, and work together in the countries that understand the context and know what's behind all this pricing and really kicking the economy of the sustainable ecosystems in our countries and not really depend on the first world wanting to help, because we can help ourselves.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Matthias. Loretta, if I can come to you briefly, what do you think? Any given country has got to set priorities, right? It can't do everything. Do you think when it comes to space, space economy, space data, one has to choose? Is it mutually exclusive?
Well, if I understood well the question, I think that we have different formulas, but we can do not only one, we can do both. We can do our own infrastructure, space infrastructure, our own satellite, but also the cooperation, international cooperation is basic. We cannot afford another way to reach the space. Data is available, and manage the data is a priority, of course. We have the experience of having a lot of data in the last big earthquake in the country and in the last fire. In the summer, we have a fire catastrophe, and we received, because Chile had signed a lot of agreements with constellations, and we receive a lot of data, but the problem is that we didn't have the capacity to process and to use the data to take decisions, which is the main objective of having the data. So we are pretty conscious that we need to build capacity in the whole chain, and having the satellite is not the solution. But also the idea is to have the capacity of knowing how to build the satellite, how to operate the satellite, but not necessarily only for us. We can also use that infrastructure to share with another countries in the region that cannot afford to have their own satellites or own constellations. That is the concept, in fact, that is the concept of the satellite program that Chile is now stating.
Thank you very much. Temi, let me come back to you. You're from Nigeria. Nigeria has its own satellite operator. It has already an infrastructure, but you're providing services. You're also making a lot of use of data. Do you have a view on this?
Yes, so Nigeria has the NICOMSAT. There's an agency that's responsible for that, and we have a bunch. Okay. Nigeria has its own satellites. NICOMSAT is the name of the agency, and they have a bunch of satellites. However, we have, like I mentioned earlier, we can leverage backhaul. I think the focus really is on getting more people online, leveraging the services that they offer, connecting served, unserved, and underserved, whether it's women or children or people in rural areas and so on. We leverage, my company actually has a partnership with Eutelsat that helps to bridge that divide by providing community Wi-Fi. However, we also have, we're exploring currently a partnership with NICOMSAT to see how we can leverage the government-owned satellites to connect more people. So I think eventually it's a mixture of whatever can work, but the point that we should see really in focus is how best are we using these satellites to connect more people and bring more people online. I think that's just what we should keep in focus. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michael, let me come back to you. This question is actually directly related to the economic impacts, etc. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. The question that I have is who is going to pay for the work that is to be done, no matter whether you're developing your own space systems or using someone else's. It's a saying from a different field, but open source software is only free if your time has no value. And that's the reality. Someone has to troubleshoot it. Someone has to figure out, when there is a natural disaster, how do you take the information that you've been given? And if you are only using it to address natural disasters as an example, well, hopefully you're not having those all the time. So how do you sustain those people in those roles until you need them? They need something else to do with their time. Otherwise, someone's going to say, well, there's an easy budget cut. They can go do something else. Well, good luck getting them back again when you need them. So, it's very easy, I think, for the global north to say, here's this data that you can use. Or we can build and launch satellites for you. That's easy. We can do that. But the burden is still on the global south to figure out how to make everything work on their end. And that's why I think that the discussion really needs to broaden from the technology-centric part of it to say, here are the specifications of what we can provide and, the paywalls, how do you get around that? Does it even make sense? The structure of what we're providing to the global south, is that what they need? Or does it just look good to us because we don't have the local knowledge? That is, I think, is something that the North really needs to look into more and do some soul searching on that front. So when it comes to these nations that are trying to figure out where to go with their economies, and I say their economies, not their space economies, but their economies in general terms, that's what needs to lead the discussion. So if it is climate change or natural disasters, or if it's economic development in agriculture or mining or these other industries, we need to understand that and work with them to build the right economic model to integrate space into that. It's about meeting their needs, not about what we can give them and feel better about ourselves.
That's fantastic. That is a great segue into my last question, which is, what is it that the global north could most usefully do in terms of bringing the greatest value to the global south in its space journey, if you will. I know from bilateral engagements with various member states, there is a complete recognition that there is a lot of data out there, but we need the capacity building because people don't know how to use it, how to access it, what to do with it. So I think, Matthias, that goes very much to the point that you made. It also goes to this point about it's only as valuable as, you're only free if your time has no value, right? So what would you look to the global north for? What is the most valuable contribution that they could make? Roshan?
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind immediately for this one. For us, as the Maldives, the realities of the climate crisis are setting in. We're starting to see the effects of climate change happening. So it's a matter of speed. It's a matter of finding these solutions quickly. We believe that international collaboration is extremely crucial to unlock access to collaborations and understanding in terms of building our capacity instead of as well as working together on access to data. It's essential to our survival, international collaboration, access to data, as well as providing us a platform for our voice. We want to be proactive. We're trying to be on top of it. We're trying to be innovative with how we use the latest technologies. It is a matter of survival for us. So we believe that these are the things that the Global North could do to help us out.
Let me just dig deeper. When you say give us a voice, is that just to share what your needs are or what?
Absolutely not. We believe that as the space sector sort of moves forward, the value of diverse voices and representation is important in shaping what you do. Innovation is always unlocked with different mindsets, I believe. A lot of different countries have a lot of different perspectives into how they move forward into space. And we believe that our voices as a small island nation can also add to it. We don't just want to take, we would like to contribute as well.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Loretta, let me come to you, please.
Okay, I think the main concept could be partnership, but a really partnership, not a help. It's not in that sense, in the sense of being really partners as equals, thinking in projects, but also thinking in the possibility of being part of the governance of the whole activity. For that, of course, we need our own local national governance. It's something that is not resolved in every country. Also, then regional governance, having at least a dialogue between Latin American and Caribbean countries, for example. And then a global governance, being part of that, having voice as well there is very, very important. Otherwise, we are going to be absent and we won't be really partners.
Thank you so much. Nayan, can I come back to you?
Yeah, first let's appreciate what they are doing right now. They are providing us open data that we are working on, and we have been able to solve some of the problems that we are facing. And there are some of the problems that needs to be fixed, and we are relying on the data that they are providing. So that's one part, and there are also some grants and funds that they are providing to sustain our projects. That's another one. And what they can do now is have some exchange programs so that we can exchange some of the skill sets that are required to build not only the satellites but the ground stations and other stuff that are required for early warning system and post-disaster assessments. From that, I think the projects from the UNUSA that we won have been very fruitful because we have skilled people. We have been able to give training to other people, build up the capacity. So it's not only training certain people, but they come back and they train other people. We're actually multiplying the number of people that know how to deal with these kind of data and how to build a satellite itself.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Matthias?
Yes, of course, what can the Global North do with us. Now, I wouldn't say for us. It's the Global North has a very important role to play, and it's partnerships that will push it forward. Everybody, even myself, I tend to say that our regions are maybe 10 years behind in space, but it's not that it's going to take us 10, 20 years to be caught up. So we don't have to plan, okay, it'll take me 20 years to be here. We can, in 2 years, we're already very close to catching up. Okay, so we don't have to plan, even to, I don't like the word catching up because the Global South doesn't have to catch up. It has to catch forward. We have to build partnerships with the Global North that will allow us to do projects that are the future of space, not the present of space. Okay, and in that sense, it's about building partnerships that doesn't see us as people that need to be helped. It's not about, oh, there was an earthquake in your country, here are some free images. Okay, it's about working with the startups, working with the companies, working with the emerging ecosystems, be it academia, be it society, be it industry, or be it government of the emerging space nations, to collaborate on together in equal terms. I'd like to point out here a partner of ours at Astralinto, the company The Orbit. We have been working together. They haven't been helping us. We have been working together to develop the Equatorial Ground Station Network to support their space assets. As we develop our ground network, they develop their space network, and we're building the services for the future. We're having space cloud services now being offered, and we're using AI technology and machine learning on the cloud in space to support risk mitigation activities in the country, in Ecuador, not after they happened, but before they happen. So that's what the Global North can do, is stop seeing us as underdeveloped countries, but seeing us as equals, as companies, as institutions, as organizations that we can collaborate on space today. That's what the Global North can do.
Thank you, Matthias. Tammy, let me come back to you, please, on the same question.
All right, so thank you. So I have just 3 things. One is, and there's a bit of inclusion that we need. I'll look at the telco space in Africa for context. So we have most of the biggest funders building subsea cables outside Africa. So you have To Africa coming in end of this year. We have Google Equinor already built, but then they build one part. They build the subsea. Operators inside those countries now have to move that by building metro, by building fiber. So it's collaborative. Everybody works together to ensure that you in your house are connected and your business is connected. So we need to enforce and ensure that, or amplify that. Secondly, is the co-creation. So while there's a lot of data that's been generated, local data eventually is what works locally. So I think that we should, Global South offers unique use cases for some of these applications, some of the technology applications, and we should have a broader understanding of the joint issues that we have. We all, based on the sessions we've seen outside, we all face the same issues. We're facing insecurity, we're facing climate change, we're facing all these things. How do you work together to achieve them, to address them? We have unique instances, you have unique instances, but how can we collaborate to ensure that the learnings we all have, we can bring them into one pool and then have a joint path going forward? I think that is what I would advise about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks for sharing that. Micah, it looks like I'm giving the last word to you. The greatest contribution that the Global North can make to the Global South in terms of developing the space economy and so on, what is it?
To exercise some humility. And I say that because the commercial companies represented here have better business concepts than most of the companies that I see in the Global North. That probably isn't the way it should be, given the long history we have in the North with space. And you look at the financial markets and how they're responding to the space industry right now. And I've built a financial product that aggregates, publicly traded space companies in a convenient package for investors. And its performance is down substantially over the past several years because those publicly traded companies, their share price is down over the past several years. Investors, the financial sector, do not believe that the space companies in the Global North are on the right track. And if you took away the government contracts that those companies have, I don't know that any of them would be profitable. So we need to figure out in the North how to reinvent the industry, to show some humility, to take lessons from our partners in the South, and then maybe that can be part of the capacity building exercise. Because capacity building should not only be about, here's how you use our technology, it should be about, here's how you build the businesses around that technology, or how you create the products that have such great socioeconomic benefit that it is worth spending limited national resources to provide those to the people. That's what we can do.
Fantastic. I regret that this session is so short. We have to close. I think, in conclusion, it's pretty clear that this kind of dialogue is extremely valuable. I don't think we have enough of these kind of conversations. It's all about the orbits are congested, how can we enable equitable access, whereas in fact there's a much more meaningful and potentially philosophical conversation to be had around how do we really democratize the space ecosystem rather than just access to space. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all the participants who came to listen. I'm sorry it's so short. We encourage the Paris Peace Forum to give us a little more time if we do this again next year. But thank you.